Welcome back to AWS OnAir, live from Reinforce here in Philly at the Pennsylvania Convention Center. I am Todd Fortier. I'm one of your hosts for today's festivities, and I am joined by the lovely Fiona. Hi, Fiona.
Festivities indeed. Hello, Todd. Hi, everyone. My name is Fiona. I am a solutions architect in the public sector at AWS. Excited to be here at Reinforce. Excited that you're all here watching with us and joining us live, loving your questions, and also getting pretty excited about this segment. We're going to be talking about exportable managed certificates on ACM, and we have the perfect people to talk us through this topic. I want to go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pravin. I'm a security specialist at AWS. I focus on data protection and privacy. I'll be talking about certificates today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zach Miller, longtime listener, first-time caller. I'm excited to be here as well. I'm a principal security solutions architect, and I typically focus on our cryptography services.
Fantastic. All right. So tell us, what are you doing here on air with us? Why are you here today?
So we have an exciting new launch that was just announced at the keynote. It is the ability to export the private key of public certificates, which you previously could not do. In the past, you would use AWS Certificate Manager public certificates on like an application load balancer or an API gateway, and you could do it for those services that are kind of integrated with ACM.
Okay.
But now you're able to export the private key of the public certificates as well as private certificates. So that means you could, use that certificate on an EC2 instance or an on-prem Linux server, web server, or something like that, right?
Okay, so how is this going to change a builder's experience on AWS? Why is it that they would want to be able to export that private key?
Pravin, you want to talk about the firewall use case? It's a pretty common one.
So one of the common use cases that we see is a lot of network firewalls try to sniff out the packets that are coming in and going outside the AWS cloud. And in order to do that, because the packets are encrypted in transit, they need the private key of the public endpoints. Today, we do not have that kind of integration with our partner services where they can get the private certificate or keys out. So with this, they will be able to actually export the certificate, use it in there, and able to decrypt the network and sniff the packets for all the traffic that is getting in and going out of the AWS cloud.
Yeah, and think about if you're an organization that wants to consolidate their cert issuance, and you don't want to have a bunch of different vendors that you're getting certs from.
Right.
In the past, if you said, "Hey, I have an on-prem server, web server, and I need a certificate, public certificate for that," you just couldn't do that with ACM. And so now you're able to export that key and put that certificate wherever you want. And so it really kind of makes the builder experience easier, consolidates down to one platform you have to kind of understand, and I think just will open up a lot of new use cases for customers.
Absolutely. We have some comments in here. Pravin, you have exciting things to talk to the audience about, but we can't hear you very well. Would you mind moving your mic up just a little closer to your voice and maybe speaking up so everyone can hear this fantastic news about ACM? Okay. So you're saying that it's now applicable to not just services that were previously integrated with ACM. Now people have this ability to kind of expand, grab that private key, and build with public certificates outside of just those previously integrated services.
Exactly. And customers love the way ACM allows them to easily manage their certificates, manage renewals. We do this thing for integrated services where we're able to automatically replace their certificate before it expires, avoiding outages and stuff. And like when I was a sysadmin, probably a decade ago, I did a lot of this stuff manually. You're like manually typing in host names and passphrases for certificates.
Right.
I have quite literally caused outages by messing that up.
Some
we are
butterfingers.
live. People are hearing this.
It's okay. I kept my job, at least for the time. I am curious though, if anyone wants to say in the chat, anyone else brave enough to admit they have caused outages by messing up certificates? Because
has this been an issue for you? Have you had those kind of butterfingers before?
It's definitely been an issue for me. In fact, whenever we start talking about certs, my brain starts to melt a little bit because I always get a little turned around on private certs versus public certs, and where does one need to go, and what am I signing with the other one? But it sounds like it's getting a little bit easier with some of these announcements.
Yeah, I mean, the quickest breakdown is public certs should be used when you don't control the endpoint. So like you have a public app that everybody uses. I don't have any control over whose iPhone, what certs are on someone's iPhone when they're accessing, my website, for example. But for private certs, you kind of need to have control of that because there's a thing called a trust store, and that tells the client, should I trust this certificate? And for public certs, they're already trusted by all major browsers and operating systems. For private certs, they're not. So you kind of have to manage that yourself.
Absolutely. So I'd love to see this in action. Do we have a demo that we can show today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be going over a demo
Let's do
of
it.
how this service would work. Am I audible right now? So I'm good.
Yeah, you're
I'm
good. Let's
You're
just
better. Yep.
yeah.
I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Thank you. So this is a new feature. What you're looking at right now in the screen is a Certificates Manager console. And until today, if you want to request a certificate from the console, you just go request. And I'm going to request a public certificate, which is what just Zach explained.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to give it what
Give it a nice little
DNS,
name.
AWS OnAir,
I love it.
and do
Calling this AWS
cert.
OnAir demo. And while you're setting this up, we do have some comments in the chat as an answer to your question. You said, has anyone else messed things up? And Adrian says that he had a 12-day outage. The data was one thing, but the certs on the parts catalog basically had to be recreated from scratch and distributed globally back in 2007.
Oh,
And we
no.
have another commenter said, and that it takes so long to figure out when it's a cert issue. So this is definitely going to help
is
with
very
that
true.
problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's always it takes a lot of time to actually identify whether it's a certificate issue or a server issue or a relay
Right.
issue.
Well, I commend the brave people in the chat for calling it out, but I know there's more of you that have had this
Come on,
issue.
be honest. Come on.
Yeah. So this allow export thing that you were looking at, this is the new feature that has come up. So
Okay.
when you try to issue the certificate, you need to make sure you enable export.
Okay.
And obviously, we always do DNS validation. This is to prove that you actually own the domain for the certificates that you're going to be
Right.
issuing. You can choose the key algorithm, and all you have to do is just click request. I've already requested certificate for the demo purposes. So if you,
Oh, there you go. You already got it going for us.
yeah, so we have the certificates already issued.
Awesome.
But over here, if you are trying to issue a certificate, you can actually click this record and say, create a Route 53 record, which would automatically, if you own the domain, it will create a record for you in the Route 53.
Okay.
You don't have to do anything, and it will just validate, and your certificate will be issued.
If you own the domain and it's in Route 53.
Yeah, and
right.
it's in the same account.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
So what are some of the security controls that are implemented to protect private keys during that export? Like, what are some considerations that went into the design?
Yeah, it's a great question. Basically, we heard from customers that they didn't want, just the ability to go export some random cert that was issued before. And so
Right.
the way it works is, you can only mark a certificate as exportable when you issue that cert.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one control. There are also IAM condition keys and other things that you can use to say, create SCPs.
Who's allowed to? Okay.
Or service control policies to say, only these specific IAM roles
Right.
can export a cert or something of that nature. So
Yeah, we have a question in the chat. Someone says I can't pronounce that name, but this person says, how long does it take to issue a cert after validation?
That's pretty quick. As soon as you do the validation, within 2 to 3 minutes, your certificate is issued.
2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's what we have
Speedy.
seen.
I mean, it's usually seconds, I would say,
Yeah.
typically, but it could be longer.
Yeah.
I think that username is not an Amazon fan. Well, you're in the wrong place here.
What are you
buddy.
doing here, then?
That's
Come
what we're
on.
talking about. Okay, so back to our demo. We've issued the certificate. We've enabled export, but
And
we've already
now-
had one provision.
Yeah, and now we can export the certificate, because now if you see here, this export option has come up.
Okay.
You will just click export. You give a passphrase for the key.
All right.
Let's say,
Just something like password 123, I'm assuming. That's good. That's good enough, right?
that's good
comment.
enough for a demo, but I would not suggest it for the
That's not good security
Fair
best
enough.
practice.
So, and then you just generate the cert, and you can see all the certificates. You got the private key, your certificate chain, and your certificate body. And you just click download, and that's going to download the cert. And then you can now go ahead and install it anywhere you want. So that's the easiest one. The next, I also have one more. We also are going to build a sample solution.
Okay.
Because a lot of customers have been asking that we want to automate the certificate installation, right? So what we have done is we created a sample code which would be out live pretty soon in a week on AWS samples, and I'm going to show that demo as well. What
Okay.
it does is it's going to pick up, export the certificate,
Okay.
and install it on EC2 instances
Aha.
based on their tags, and it is an automated process. We've created an API, and you can just call the API and pass the details. I can actually quickly show
Yeah, let's do it.
a diagram which explains the architecture for this. This is a quick one. There is an API gateway. You call the API. It goes to a step function. The step function collects all the data related to the certificate, where you want to install it and stuff like that.
Okay.
It stores it in a DynamoDB table.
Okay.
And then it exports the certificate and passes it on to a system's SSM documentation or automation doc that we call the SSM automation doc. And the systems manager or SSM goes and installs these certificates on EC2 instances based on the tag that you provide. So you can now scale it out, and you can also install it on on-prem servers as well.
Okay, so what we're seeing here is not just the benefit of being able to take that private key and put it on the EC2 instance, but also a way to automate that process. So all you have to do is just that first, like kicking it off, and then the step function will handle getting that key, storing it, putting it on the EC2 instance.
That's always my reaction when I see some new service announcement or new feature announcement. I'm like, but is there an API? Because I'm going to want to scale this and do this programmatically. And it sounds like there is. And there's even sample code in an AWS samples repository.
So that we haven't published it, but it will be published in a week or two.
Okay, great.
Yeah, another thing that's useful to know is there are event bridge notifications that are published when like a certificate is about to expire, for example. So you can trigger off of those to automatically go and, grab that, export that cert, and then put it where it needs to go. So, we wanted to make sure that customers have the ability to use automation to make, renewals easier.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, I think that this maybe just addressed the question that we got here from not Amazon fan, who has clarified that they are an AWS fan, but not an Amazon fan. Which,
I see.
All right, well, we're happy you're here either way.
We're glad you're here.
And their question is, will ACM remind me when a cert is about to expire? How do I automate? Looks like you got to scroll right on back to that architecture diagram that we showed, because that's that exact process of automation, isn't it?
So so there are two parts to this solution. The second part is the automation part. We also what it does is it looks for the automation event from Event Bridge.
Okay.
And once that is executed, it actually kickstarts the step function again automatically. If the renewal is successful, it will go back, check in the database if the certificates was earlier issued and where it was installed. It will take that data and then install the renewed certificate on the EC2 instances again. So the whole full-fledged renewal process is also automated.
Yeah, so full end-to-end automation.
And full end-to-end automation with this sample, yes.
Nice.
Fantastic. So can you show us how that automation works? Is that something that you have set up?
I have the automation set up today for issuance and installing on an EC2 instance.
Let's see
We can do it.
Let's dive right on in.
Yeah. So
all right, here we are. What are we looking at?
So I'm currently on the AWS cloud. I need to get to AWS shell.
Awesome.
So this is basically the console where I'll be running the commands.
Okay.
And I already have the payload set up, so I can show what the payload looks like quickly.
Perfect.
This is so what you pass in the payload right now is the certificate ARN, which uniquely identifies the certificate within AWS.
Perfect.
You will give it a name that you want to have the certificate file to have, and then you'll give it a strong passphrase to export it.
Which of course was password 123.
Yeah.
This one's a lot stronger.
Keep strong passphrase.
Yeah.
That's better. There we go.
And then you have then you specify the EC2 tag that you want to install. So key value. So I have this payload already uploaded, and I'm going to run this command. This is the command. This is the API endpoint. This is the format of the payload, and this is the payload that is going to be passed to the API.
Perfect.
I want to take
Go ahead and run it.
Yeah.
So you've already done the tagging of the EC2
servers.
So there's a little bit of prerequisites for this code to work. You have to actually.
So if you see this is the EC2 instance on which it's going to install, and it has the tag event and dev. So this is what I mentioned in the payload, which is going to be executed. So you go here and you just hit enter. That should start the state machine.
Yep.
So you're given an example here with EC2. We do have a comment in the chat from Bhavesh who says, for IoT, how do you generate the CA and client certificate if you're not using IoT Core?
It's an interesting question. I mean, well, typically I see customers use private certs for IoT.
Okay.
So that might be a slightly different use case. But, you could theoretically, I suppose, use public certs as well. That's a great question. They may have stumped me. I mean, so I typically see customers use IoT Core for that.
Bhavesh, did you stump Zach?
Yeah, I did it. I think so.
Keep these great questions coming. But so you said that this is something that is maybe still to be figured out?
I mean, you could definitely, use the traditional ways you communicate with IoT devices to push a certificate down to that. But I think, I typically see customers use IoT Core just because it's, we take away the operational heavy lifting and kind of that's the main way I see.
And it's integrated to all the other services, and so there's a very specific way.
But then you were also saying that typically it's private certificates with IoT use cases.
A lot of the time, yeah, because usually it's you're controlling that IoT sensor or something.
Right.
It's tracking heat or temperature, and it's reporting back. And so they want to encrypt that communication, so they'll use the private cert. But it doesn't necessarily need to be public because my random laptop doesn't need to trust that.
It's also verifying identity of the device, allowing it to connect. And
That's right.
The question, not an Amazon fan, he's just peppering us with questions.
I love it.
Can you make this code available to us? And we mentioned earlier that this will be available very quickly.
It's coming
but
soon.
For now, you're just demoing it. But I want to make sure we get enough time to get through your demo. So we've tagged the EC2 server. We ran your API endpoint. The state machine is working. I imagine that's what we're looking at.
Yeah,
now.
so you're looking at right now is the step function has executed successfully.
Okay.
And you can see it's in a success state, which means it's
go.
gone ahead and installed the certificate on the EC2 instance. Now you can actually go into the EC2 instance and check it pretty quickly.
Yeah, let's make sure.
Just run the command to list. So what we have done is in the automation document. For 1 second.
Hit it with a paste. Boom.
So these are the two certs that we created. So you can see the full chain and the private key is also installed. So if you go to the private folder.
Okay. And while you're taking us to the private folder, we have Houston here who is visiting us for the first time and says, "What are they talking about?" And not an Amazon fan is also confused. They say, "Can you please summarize?" We are absolutely happy to summarize. So we are talking about managed certificates on Amazon Certificate Manager and how to take a private key and use it with. Take the private key for a public certificate.
Right.
There's private and public everywhere, but we're taking the private key for a public certificate.
There it is.
And then we're using it with services that weren't previously integrated with our certificate manager. So for example, we're giving a demo right now of how you can attach that private key to an Amazon EC2 instance so that you can access it with a public certificate.
Yeah, so just to make it a little bit more clear, so a lot of customers run their Nginx servers and stuff like that on EC2 instances, and they want to terminate the TLS on the server.
Right.
So they want the certificates installed on the EC2 instances, or it can also be on-prem instances. We are trying to automate that whole process because ACM doesn't have a direct integration with EC2 like it has with application load balancer or your CloudFront. Right. So what we have done is we have done an automation. It will export the certificate, the private key, and the public key of the public certificate. It will install it on the EC2 instance for any Nginx server or any server that you might be running on there or an Apache server, and then you can just use that in your application code.
And this is not necessarily limited to EC2 because we can do this programmatically. Now we have access to
anything.
Anywhere you might need this cert.
Options are endless.
Yeah, it gives you a lot more flexibility. It will, likely reduce costs for a lot of customers and
manual effort.
Yeah, exactly. Makes things much more automatable.
And we have a comment here who says, "Certificates are my favorite, said no one ever." It sounds like this was maybe something that customers were telling you, that it was complex, that there were all these different pieces that had to be done manually, but you guys have helped customers out with that and created this automated process. So thank you so much for being here and explaining this to our audience. Thank you all so much for asking questions. We hope that we can have you again on the show sometime soon, and we hope that you all will stick around for our next segment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.